Resident Evil has always had mesmerizing atmosphere and locations. Today, I'm going to be doing a Resident Evil tier list on a topic that I have never covered before. I am going to be doing the Resident Evil locations tier list. This list will not include locations from Resident Evil 5, 6, Outbreak, or Revelations. We're going to be starting with the first game in the storyline, and then we're going to be working our way up to the current storyline. So starting off here with Resident Evil 0, we have the Ecliptic Express, which you guys don't want to know how many times it took me to say that. It's going to be our first S tier location because the feel of a Resident Evil game being set on a moving train was just absolutely epic. The only unfortunate thing is you don't spend that much time on the train, and it's only in the beginning stages. Next up, we have our first A tier RE location, and that is going to be the training school. The training school is definitely one unique location in Resident Evil 0, as the main hall looks a lot like the Spencer Mansion and the Ashford Mansion, whereas the other rooms and locations in this training school looks a lot different, so I'll give it an A rank. So next up, going into the B rank, is the laboratory. I didn't really think the lab in Resident Evil 0 was nearly as good as the labs in any of the other RE games, and as far as I remember, it was just filled with a lot of pain and hunters. Next up, going in the B rank as well, is the treatment plant. The treatment plant is pretty cool in RE0 because it's actually the same location in which the second Birkin fight happens in RE2, so it's a pretty cool callback to that game. But one thing that loses points on this location is how hard this stupid puzzle was with pushing these crates. Like seriously, it took me forever. Now moving on to Resident Evil 1, and y'all already know this is going to be an S rank, it is the Spencer Mansion. The Spencer Mansion is not only the first location that we get as Resident Evil fans, but it's also the location that holds the first zombie encounter, the first zombie dog encounter, and pretty much the first of a lot of things. I'm more of a fan of the RE1 remake as that's the one I've played more than the original, but both Spencer Mansions in the games are truly legendary. In my opinion, a lot of the locations in Resident Evil 1 are just great and iconic locations of the Resident Evil series, so with the courtyard, I'm gonna go ahead and put this at the top of the A rank. The courtyard is a really cool and eerie place to be in Resident Evil 1, and it also feels very rewarding to be there as getting through the Spencer Mansion takes a lot of time, so it's really nice to be in a different location for once. Next up is the dormitory, which is also one of my favorite locations in my opinion, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in the S rank, as this location holds the first spider encounter that we ever see in the Resident Evil franchise. This location holds a special place in my heart just because it scared the crap out of me as a kid. Another certified S rank location in Resident Evil 1 is the Arkley Laboratory. They nailed the way that Arkley Lab looked in the remake in my opinion, but even in the original RE1, it is really mesmerizing to finally make it to the Arkley Lab and know that you're at the final stretch of the game. It is also really refreshing to finally get to see that epic explosion when you hit the tyrant with that rocket launcher. So, all in all, I'm going to go ahead and give this location an S rank on this tier list. Next up, we are on to the Resident Evil game that got me introduced to the franchise, Resident Evil 2. And going at the top of the S rank tier list, we have the police station, which of course is also known as the RPD. The RPD was a genius idea on the developers' part as they turned a museum into a police station and made it look absolutely beautiful. But now moving on to our next location of RE2, it is the Raccoon Sewers. There's a lot of cool moments that do happen in the sewers in RE2, with I think personally my favorite being the alligator scene. But other than that, the sewers is not really that crucial of a part in the game, and it pretty much serves as the in-between section of the RPD and the lab. In my opinion, the sewers in RE2 original were really easy to run through, but in the remake, they were quite a pain in the because of the G adults that you run into. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and put the sewers in the B rank, and we're going to move on with the next location, which is the nest. I'm going to go ahead and put this at the bottom of the A rank because I've always liked the nest location, especially in the original RE2. I remember getting to the nest when playing RE2 as a kid, and finally getting the fuse and being able to go to the centerpiece and turn all the power on and just watch as all the lights go on for the hallways and having all those options to go down those halls. So yeah, I've always liked the nest in RE2, but one location I didn't care for so much in RE2 was the orphanage. I feel like all of these locations though in Resident Evil aren't bad locations, so that's why I don't have anything lower than a C rank when it comes to this tier list. So all in all, I think the orphanage is an alright location. It was just hard for me to like it because it was never introduced in the original RE2, and even when you play the remake, you don't get to experience that much time in the orphanage. But enough talking about RE2, because now it's time to move on to Resident Evil 3. And of course, starting off with RE3, we're going to be talking about Uptown. Uptown was only a location that really serves as the beginning of the game, so this is going to be the first C rank location. But moving on with the next location, which is a much better location in Resident Evil 3 in my opinion, it is Downtown. So that is going to be an A rank. Downtown had a lot of more work and detail put into the game, because that actually serves as a big chunk of the game. As a fan of RE2, we always wanted the ability to be able to free roam more in Raccoon City's downtown section, and that's something that we finally got in Resident Evil 3. Next up is Resident Evil 3's Clock Tower. The St. Michael Clock Tower is going to go all the way up at the very top of the S rank on this tier list. Everything about being inside the clock tower, especially the main hall, combined with the music score, makes it feel just like a classic Resident Evil game in its truest form. It's safe to say that the vibes inside the clock tower are truly unmatched, and that's something that we got robbed of as fans when playing RE3 Remake. And I've gotten a couple tattoos in my day now, but one tattoo that I had to get so I could remember it forever was the St. Michael Clock Tower. I will forever remember the clock tower as my favorite location. But let's move on to the next location in RE3, which is the Raccoon City Hospital. The Raccoon City Hospital isn't going to go at the top of the S rank like the clock tower did, but it is going to go at the top of the A rank because just like the downtown sections, I thought it was really cool that we got the chance to actually run around inside the Raccoon City Hospital, which is truly a location that we wouldn't even know existed if it wasn't for a game like Resident Evil 3. Moving on with another really good solid location in Resident Evil 3 is the Raccoon City Park. This is another one of those spots that we wouldn't know even existed if it wasn't for a game like Resident Evil 3, and I think in the original, they did this park really cool looking, but it's pretty unfortunate that in the remake we got robbed of this location. I don't even think it really appears at all, unless you count this location right here as the park. But anyways, moving on, we've got the last location of Resident Evil 3, and that is going to be none other than the Dead Factory. I put this one like right there in the middle of the A rank because it is a pretty cool location to say the least, and it can be kind of annoying with all the drain demos, or brain suckers as you may call them, that you might run into when getting to the Dead Factory. But other than that, it's pretty cool that this serves as the final location in Resident Evil 3 and also the final fighting stage for Jill Valentine versus Nemesis. Actually, one more location before we move on with Resident Evil 3, it is Nest 2, which I'm going to go ahead and put at the bottom of the C rank because this was a pretty dull location. And all locations in RE3 Remake were pretty brief locations that you don't spend much time in at all for that matter. Next up is the first location of Code Veronica X, and it is definitely going to go up there in the S rank because it is the prison. The only ever times we've seen a prison in a Resident Evil storyline besides Code Veronica was Revelations 2 and the Resident Evil Afterlife movie directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. But after all the prisons we've seen in this franchise, this one is hands down 100% my favorite prison location in all of Resident Evil. This prison is a very spooky location. It even forces you to use your lighter just to see things at times. Next Code Veronica X location we got is the military training facility, which I went ahead and put right there in the B rank next to the orphanage of RE2. This spot can be very annoying in Code Veronica X just because of all the enemies that are laid out around it and even outside of it. It does hold some good quantities to it though, because it is the place where you can get the bow gun for the first time. And it also serves as the location where Steve Burnside has to choose life over death for his zombified father that is trying to take over Claire Redfield. Most people don't show a lot of sympathy for Steve, but I think this was a pretty sad moment. Next up for CVX, we have the Palace, which is going to go right up there in the A rank, second place to the hospital. The Palace not only holds very mesmerizing rooms and halls, but it also holds some of the very best soundtracks and save room musics that we've ever gotten in a Resident Evil game. The only thing that's a shame about the Palace is there's so many locations in CVX that we don't get to spend enough time inside the Palace. Hopefully they remake this game so we get to see it with better graphics. Next up is the Private Residence, which is also known as the Ashford Mansion in my opinion. The Private Residence, I went ahead and put right in like the middle of the A rank, and I think that's a pretty good spot for it. It's a pretty good location with cool music in it as well, but it sucks that you have to carry around the lighter because of all the bats that swarm you when you get there. Other than that, it's a pretty cool location in which you can actually get the beginning parts of the Dragonfly thing, which goes on to be the ending piece that you need to end the game in Code Veronica X. If I could explain it any better, pretty much the Private Residence serves as the beginning of the end for Code Veronica. Okay, and speaking of which, we are on the last location of Code Veronica X, which is the Transport Terminal, or also known as Antarctica. I went ahead and put this one in the B rank. It's got some pretty annoying sections to it in which you can get poisoned by many things except spiders, but it's also got some pretty cool moments because it's also got the death of Steve and also, of course, the final ending. Okay, so now that we're done with Code Veronica, we are going to be moving on to Resident Evil 4. And of course, with Resident Evil 4, we're starting with the Village. I put the Village in RE4 right up there in the top 3 highest of the S rank. The idea of being stuck in this little unfamiliar village and having to hold off on your own and survive long enough until who knows how long was a completely genius idea on the parts of the developers. And another good S-rank location in RE4 is Salazar's Castle, which is going to go right there in the middle of the S-rank. The castle sections of RE4 were really good locations, just like the rest of Resident Evil 4 for that matter, but it was really cool how every time you go to a new section of the game, you get treated with different sets of enemies. And the last location of Resident Evil 4, which is going to make its way right at the bottom of the S rank, is the island. You can't go wrong with the locations in Resident Evil 4 for how good their atmosphere was, so all 3 of these locations are going up there in the S rank. The island is a really cool section because when you reach the island, you have to do quite a bit of boss fights, including the Jack Krauser fight, the U3, and of course the final Sadler fight. Now we're moving on to Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, which I've only played 2 times before in my life, so I'm going to go ahead and put the guest house in the A rank. Now this is the part of the video where I try and remember Resident Evil 7 to the best of my ability, so if there's anything that you guys think that I said wrong or is inaccurate, please go ahead down in the comments below and let me know how you feel about this game. The only thing I know about the guest house for certain is it serves as the demo version of RE7 where you get to play as the news recorder guy and go through the actual guest house for the very first time. But next up on this list is the main house, or also called the Baker House. Man, the Baker house really had some spooky, messed up stuff happen in the course of being here. You actually have to do a lot of Jack Baker encounters and fights when in the main house. And one thing that's also a guarantee is when you reach the basement, you're going to be greeted with your first molded encounter. So the guest house and the main house are going to both be A rank locations on this tier list, but I'm going to go ahead and put the old house in the B rank location because this house you actually don't spend that much time in compared to the others. Like I said, I don't think any of these locations are necessarily bad locations in Resident Evil, as they're known for having some really banger locations in the franchise. But this one is definitely a shorter location that you don't spend as much time in, apart from having to deal with a lot of bees and Marguerite Baker herself. Now, next location of RE7 is going to be the testing area, which I'm going to go ahead and put way down here in the C rank, for about the same reason as the old house. You don't spend a lot of time in it. This is where you have the first ever fat molded fight, and it's also where you have the weird birthday for Ethan puzzle that gets really annoying to try and figure it out. Trust me guys, I spent forever trying to figure this part out. But next up is notoriously the worst location in Resident Evil 7, so it's going to go down in the bottom of the C rank, and that is the wrecked ship. Throughout your experience in the wrecked ship, you get the chance to play as either Mia or Zoe depending on who you save, but the actual gameplay in the wrecked ship is just absolutely brutal, and it's a lot of trying to figure out where to go to and how to get there. So to end off the locations in RE7, there's the salt mine, which I don't remember much, so I'm going to put in the C, and also the end of Zoe's swamp area, which I've never played before. But now moving on to our last Resident Evil game here, which I'm a lot more familiar with than the previous one, and that is Resident Evil 8 Village. Of course, we're starting off RE8 with none other than the Village, and this one I put down there in the S rank. The snow atmosphere was absolutely great, and you spent a lot of time there, which is awesome. But next up on the list is Castle de Maîtresse, and I'm going to put this one way up there in the A rank, because out of all the castles that we've had in the Resident Evil games, the graphics on this one was just absolutely stunning. And of course, it's not called Castle de Maîtresse for no reason, as you actually get chased down by de Maîtresse the entirety of being in the castle. It makes it really relieving when you actually take her down in the boss fight, and then you know that you don't have to deal with her for the rest of the game. Okay, next up we're going to be talking about House Bienvito, which I'm going to go ahead and put way up there in the B rank. One accolade about Resident Evil 8 that I can give it is that this section of House Bienvito is truly the most terrifying section of the game, and almost all Resident Evil games for that matter. The idea of House Bienvito and Village was really great, and I just wish they elaborated on it more and had more time spent in House Bienvito. But next up is going to be another C rank location, and that is going to be Maru's Reservoir. This part of the game definitely reminded me a lot of the Del Lago section of RE4, except without having a boat and having to be on foot. But other than that, just like most locations in this game, the time spent here is very brief, and all you actually have to do here is open up that sluice to get the dam open, and kill Maru, of course. Okay, another C rank location of Resident Evil 8 is the Stronghold. I'm just surprised that the guy who made this tier list even put the Stronghold in this tier list itself, because am I the only one that feels like the Stronghold was a very minuscule section of Resident Evil 8? I feel like there wasn't really much to do here besides loot and get little extra achievements done. So now we are on to the final location of this tier list, and that is going to be Heisenberg's factory. I went ahead and put this location at the very top of the B rank. They actually bring in some really cool and unique looking new enemies to the game when you get to Heisenberg's factory, and of course the final fight with Heisenberg is really cool, and it leads you to the final section of the game itself. Now, the factory look isn't really the best atmosphere around, but I would still give it the top of the B rank. Okay, that is going to go ahead and wrap up my Resident Evil locations tier list. There was a lot of locations to talk about, and I tried to do that as fast as possible, so now that we're here, we can actually take a deeper look at all of my entries, and you guys can agree or disagree with my list. Okay, so in the S rank, I have the Clock Tower, the Police Station, the Village, the Ecliptic Express, Salazar's Castle, Spencer's Mansion, the Prison, the Village from Resident Evil Village, Arkley Laboratory, the Dormitory, and the Island from Resident Evil 4. In the A rank, I have the Hospital, the Palace, Castle de Maîtresse, the Courtyard, the Private Residence, the Downtown from RE3, the Main House, the Dead Factory, the Training School, the Guest House, and Nest from RE2. B rank locations are Heisenberg's Factory, the Raccoon City Sewers, the House B and Vito, the Transport Terminal, the Laboratory from RE0, the Park from RE3, the Treatment Plant, the Old House from RE7, the Military Training Facility from CVX, and the Orphanage in RE2. Lastly, down here in the C rank, we've got Maru's Reservoir, Uptown in RE3, the Testing Area in RE7, Nest 2 from RE3 Remake, the Stronghold from Village, the Salt Mine, the Wrecked Ship, and the Swamp from RE7. I had an absolute blast making this tier list video, and I'm glad that I finally found a tier list video on the locations of Resident Evil that was as good as this one was. Please drop a big like on this video if you want to see more tier list videos from me, and comment down below what kind of tier list videos of Resident Evil you want to see next. I post Resident Evil Reverse gameplay daily, so if that's something you're interested in, then please hit subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss a single daily Resident Evil Reverse upload. But you guys already know how it goes. Hit like, subscribe, and without further ado, I will see you guys in the next video tomorrow. Peace.